Okay, this is our second lecture for this week. This one should be relatively short, but feminism is its own set of concepts, so I did want to give it its own little presentation. We talked about in the first lecture how uh, functionalism and conflict theory don't really account for really talking about all of what encapsulates sex and gender, and that feminist theory does a lot better job. But feminism is such a weirdly loaded word in our society that I have to address exactly what it is. Feminism is the belief in the social, political, and economic equality of the sexes and the social movements organized around that belief. So that's all it is. It's not Feminism is not saying that women are better than men. Feminism is saying that women are equal to men. And in the United States, the history of the women's movement, as you could call feminism, can be divided into three historic waves. The first wave of feminism was the earliest period of feminist activity and included the period from about the mid 19th century until when American women won the right to vote in 1920. This movement centered on getting women the right to vote, known as the suffragist movement, but it also um, dealt with issues of child labor. It dealt with issues regarding domestic abuse. Just convincing many American men that it's not okay to beat their wives was first wave feminism. They were really starting from the very basics. Um, and yeah, but first wave feminism, it would not be out of order for you to think getting the right to vote, the suffragist movement. That's the cornerstone of that. The second wave of feminism was the period of feminist activity from about the 1960s and 70s. It is typically associated with issues of women's equal access to employment and education. So during this second wave of feminism, women feminists started to argue that women should be allowed to do any job that a man could do. Women should be allowed to get any level of education that a man could do. Um, so that's one part. This second wave of feminism, when people vilify feminism, when people say, "Oh, I don't need feminism," they often are talking because about this second wave, because the second wave did have a tendency to focus more on women, to empower women at the expense of men. Talk about sisterhood and you don't need a man and calling men chauvinist pigs and all of that. But at its core, so there is a lot of emotional baggage on second wave feminism. But at its core, it was about getting women the right to be able to do any job or have any education that men had. Now, I mentioned the emotional volatility of second wave feminism. This There was a response to second wave feminism called male liberationism, which is a movement that originated in the 1970s to discuss the challenges of masculinity. And at first, male liberationism was, um, it didn't last very long. It's a very quick movement because it very quickly broke down into two additional movements, the men's rights movement and the pro feminist men's movement. So male liberationism broke down into these two. The men's rights movement made the argument that feminism creates disadvantages for men. Namely, and these the men's rights movement, their arguments have always been clunky. Their original arguments were from the 70s were, well, if women aren't going to be cooking my food, then who's going to be cooking my food and taking care of my house and who's going to be taking care of children? Certainly I don't want to do those things. Those were the sexist arguments made by the men's rights movement. The pro-feminist men's movement then, which broke off, argued that sexism doesn't just hurt women, it also hurts men. So sexism keeps men from being able to take care of babies or maybe being able to express themselves in a more feminine way. And modern feminists, modern people probably in general, give a lot more credence to that pro-feminist men's movement than they do to any iteration of the men's rights movement. So once that pro-feminist men's movement made their point, in about the 1990s, the third wave of feminism kicked in. This is the most recent period of feminist activity, and it focuses on issues of diversity and the varieties of identities that women can possess. So, third wave feminism talks about two big things. Um, we'll talk about your right to be both masculine and feminine. So, men making the argument that sexism hurts men too. Men should be allowed to take care of children. Third wave feminists said, you're absolutely right. Men should be able to take care of children. And women should be able to, um, you know, participate in sports or be firefighters or whatever. I didn't really get this until I had my daughter. And my brother, who actually was a gender studies minor in college, I saw Dora and I saw her Dora the Explorer stuff in her backpack and the rope and and map, and it's like, this is a really good feminist icon, I thought to myself. And that, from a second wave feminist perspective, absolutely is right. But then saw Dora in the dress, and I said, look what they did to Dora. They they took the power out of Dora. Why did they do this to Dora? They weakened Dora. And my brother said, no, Jeremy, they didn't weaken her. That's just showing that Dora can be both an explorer in the right picture and a ballerina on the left picture, right? You can be all of these things in third wave feminism. A woman can wear lipstick and go to a gun range, right? That's the concept of third wave feminism. Second wave feminism would make the argument that by dressing up in a dress, they would argue just to please men, that somehow perpetuates sexism. But the third wave feminist would say, no, or women or men can dress in a dress to make themselves feel pretty, for example. That is the third wave feminist idea. And then another idea in third wave feminism is that our identities matter. So your identity as a man or a woman interacts with your racial identity, interacts with your ethnic identity, interacts with your class identity. So what it means to be a white woman is different than what it means to be a black woman, is different from what it means to be a Latina woman, right? And those are different identities with the commonality of being a woman, and those differences in identities matter. Okay, so that's the gist of third wave feminism. And in our next lecture, we are going to move into sexuality. If you have any questions, let me know. I look forward to seeing you on the discussion boards. But there's still one more lecture.